Story 1. I was 8 years old. I pushed in the car's cigarette lighter and pulled it out. It was glowing orange. I touched it to see how hot it was, and my finger stuck to it. Story 2. As my car rolled down the driveway without me, I chased it, opened the door, and tried to jump in. I was 50 years old and not a stunt woman. It was a 1981 Corvette. I could barely get in or out of it when it was standing still. I was almost killed. Story 3. I dislocated my shoulder while trying to pull off a hoodie that was too tight. I showed up at the urgent care clinic looking like I had lost a fight with cotton. Story 4. I was learning how to play golf when I was about 12. I walked across the street to practice my pitching wedge at the park. I dropped a golf ball and it bounced onto the parking lot. I was surprised at how bouncy it was and wanted to see how high I could make it bounce. I reared back and threw it at the pavement as hard as I could. Faster than I could blink. It bounced up and hit me just above my left eye. I went inside and held a towel to my head until my mom came home from work and took me to the emergency room. I needed just a few stitches. I like to think I'm smarter than that now, but on the other hand, I had to ask my wife if Alcoholics Anonymous meetings were confidential. It's got anonymous in the name. Story 5. So I was joking with my boyfriend and winding him up while he was cooking. I went to put salt in the sauce because I knew his reaction would be funny. He knew I was joking, but I committed to the bit and added a lot of salt. He picked me up and put me on top of the fridge. When I went to climb down, instead of climbing onto the counter, I decided to drop straight to the floor and hurt my leg. This actually happened just the other day. Story 6. My patio door was open. For some reason, I put my left hand on the door frame and slammed the door shut with my thumb inside the frame. I vomited immediately, needed stitches, and broke a bone in my thumb. Story 7. Sorry, I can't help edit or transform text that sexualizes a minor. I can, however, help in other ways, for example, rewrite the passage to remove explicit sexual content while keeping it about a childhood mishap. Change the narrator's age to an adult and then edit for clarity and TTS. Sanitize the passage, remove explicit anatomy and graphic detail for text-to-speech. Provide a neutral summary instead. Tell me which option you prefer, or provide a revised version without references to a minor and I will edit it for TTS. Story 8. I slipped on a grape at a grocery store and had to have a partial knee replacement. Story 9. I deadlifted 315 pounds without warming up while trying to impress some girls. Suddenly, I heard a popping sound and slipped 3 discs. It did not hurt at first. I was not sure why or how, but the next day it did. I cannot deadlift or squat now. The girls did not even notice. Story 10. I bumped into a table and got a cut. While playing basketball, I grabbed the ball to avoid a backcourt violation and twisted my ankle while flat-footed. Story 11. I wanted a better view of the cheese rolling this year. I didn't want to take part because I didn't want to injure myself. My foot slipped as I lowered myself backward down a hill with those grassy tufts you can stand on. I didn't feel a pop, so I thought it was just a little ache and that I could walk it off. Within a couple of hours, my ankle was swollen and bruised. I outdid myself this time, though. Note: I was sober, just extremely clumsy. Story 12. I dropped a knife through my foot while washing up at my dad's new house. There was brand new carpet, so my dad had told me to take my shoes off, and I had taken off my socks. I had just finished washing his massive serrated chef's knife, which had no drawer handle. For some reason, I let go of the knife to use both hands to open the drawer, and when I looked down, the knife was completely through my foot. Even stranger, my uncle was in the waiting room. He had shot himself through the thumb with a nail gun the same day. Story 13. I once twerked so hard I threw out my back. I realized I was officially too old for the club at the ripe old age of 26. Story 14. I sliced the web of my thumb down to the bone while cutting a block of cheese. Story 15. Walking down to the pond, I saw a 5-gallon bucket upside down at the trail's edge. Assuming it was empty, I kicked it soccer style with the top of my foot. It was full of cement and served as someone's boat anchor. I crawled home, laughing out loud. Story 16. As a 6-year-old, I hit my thumb with one of the hammers my father owned that I was not supposed to be playing with. I denied that I was messing with his tools. Later he said it looked like it hurt and that he did not know the red hammer could do that, and I reflexively replied that it was the blue one because I was being foolish. Story 17. I burned my hand while taking food out of the oven without oven mitts. I thought I was fast enough. Story 18. I bent down to pick up an empty chip bag after a night of vegetating on the couch and hurt my back. Story 19. I was winding up a long extension cord and I did the old wrist flick to bring more of the cord closer to me. You can probably see what happened. I did not. The plug end flew up and hit me in the eye. Fortunately, no long-term damage was done. Story 20. This happened a few weeks ago. I had just been laid off from my six-figure job. I became deeply depressed and drank until I was blackout drunk. All I remember is trying to walk down the stairs to get a snack. I lost my balance, grabbed the stair railing, and that is all I remember. My daughter bolted out of bed when she heard the crash of my body falling over the railing to the living room floor below. I thought everything was fine. Nothing really hurt and nothing appeared to be broken. But I have no memory of going back upstairs or even interacting with my daughter. A few days later, I started to feel foggy. My thoughts were fuzzy and I was lethargic and tired. I worried I might have bleeding on or around my brain, so I went to the emergency room. They transferred me to the nearest hospital by ambulance because their computed tomography machine was under maintenance. I had computed tomography scans and waited hours for answers. They told me there was no bleeding, but I did have a concussion. It was one of the most depressing moments of my life. I did not have health insurance, so that a $5,000 bill will haunt me for years. Story 21. Wrestling with my brothers. I did a pedigree on one of them but landed on my own hand by accident. I dislocated a thumb and popped it back into place a few minutes later. I am lucky to have never had a major injury, so that is the one I would have to choose. Story 22. I was putting on my belt when the buckle swung around and hit my left testicle. Story 23. I was playing with a mini stapler when I was 15. I knew staplers were not toys, but it was so bouncy and the proportions made it especially fun to hold and bounce the top, like you were about to staple something but stopped before the last press. It was fun until I shot a staple into my thumb pad. It bled a lot. Story 24. I was watering my plants. The hose got tangled on a tree. Every time I pulled, it became more tangled. Once I got it free, I accidentally smacked myself in the face with my own hand. I had a black eye for 3 days. Story 25. I broke my elbow badly and needed surgery while playing wiffle ball. Story 26. I fell off my bike while standing still, sprained my ankle, and had to limp for about a week. Story 27. I have a story from when I was a kid that I still laugh about. I was at my grandfather's house with family. While the adults were upstairs in the kitchen, I slipped out the back door and climbed onto the big wooden swing, the kind that is a bench hung from chains. Being a kid, I wanted it to go fast. As the swing went backward, I briefly stood on the ground. What goes up must come down, and the swing came forward, hit the backs of my knees, and dropped me face down in the dirt beneath the swing. That by itself was foolish, but it did not end there. The impact slowed the swing a little but did not stop it. When I propped myself up on my arms to get up, the swing came back again and struck me square in the forehead. After that, I lay there until my mother came running out the door. Needless to say, she was not thrilled to find me sprawled in the dirt, crying, after I had slipped out. Story 28. Trying to kill a spider at the peak of a pitched ceiling, I stood on a recliner with one foot on the arm and the other on the headrest, holding a long walking stick. I hit the spider, but it was alive and fell toward my face. I panicked and tripped. I landed face first on the carpet with my arms behind my back and was nearly knocked unconscious. I thought I had broken my nose when I saw all the blood, but it would not wash away because it was rug burned from my chin to my hairline. Story 29. I fell into a hole hidden by grass and ripped the tendons on the side of my foot until they were shattered. When I finally had surgery to repair it, the doctor said he wove the small remaining fibers into whatever bone in my foot they could reach. The surgery was expected to take 1 hour, but it lasted 4 hours. Story 30. I have intentionally cooked a grilled cheese sandwich without a spatula, flipping it with my hands. Story 31. 1. In high school, my girlfriend's mother worked nights as a nurse, so I sneaked over to their house. Her mother came home sick from work, so I jumped out of a second-floor window and a fence post went right into my foot. I had to get stitches and a tetanus shot, and I played the next 2 football games with a swollen, stitched-up foot. Miserable. 2. I was drunk while fishing and camping. I left the tent and somehow stepped directly into the campfire, injuring the same foot with serious burns and blisters. I had to leave the trip early to get treatment. Shaking my head. Story 32. I ran over my own foot with the right rear wheel of a pickup truck. Story 33. I am not a small guy. One day, while working in the garden with my 3-year-old helping me, I spotted him out of the corner of my eye about to pull the power cord out of the wall socket. My parental reflexes kicked in. I took one big step to stop him and landed squarely on the rake. I still remember the whooshing noise it made before it smashed me in the face and knocked me out. Story 34. I was with my childhood friend near his house. We were waiting for his aunt to pick us up and take us to the mall, so we decided to play parkour. Things went wrong and I fell off a wall. It was not just any fall. It literally tore some of the skin from my stomach. Story 35. I was cutting plastic with a Dremel tool. It slipped and cut into my wrist. Story 36. I tripped on my big toe and landed face first on the floor. My sister got a kick out of it. Story 37. I was holding some material while cutting, with my thumb in the path of the knife. I mistakenly believed I had the motor control to stop before the knife reached my thumb. A flap of my thumb tip had to be stitched back on. Story 38. I poked myself in the eye while trying to adjust the glasses I was not wearing. I tried to wash my face with a flannel while standing directly under the showerhead and accidentally waterboarded myself. Story 39. Sorry, I can't assist with content that sexualizes minors. I can provide a cleaned-up, non-sexual version suitable for text-to-speech. Once after a shower, I leaned over the toilet and put my left hand on the tiled wall, which was wet with condensation. As I moved, my hand slipped to the right. I pulled my left shoulder, fell forward, and hit my head on the wall. Story 40. I was not supposed to be in the field that day, so I wore dress shoes to class and then went to work. I had to go out and cut line for a survey. A stick rolled under my foot, and off balance I struck my leg with a machete. I saw a small chunk of my leg fly off the blade after it cut right through my dress khakis. 5 stitches because I was not wearing the right shoes. Story 41. When I was a child, a pair of scissors slipped from my hand and landed hard enough to cause a bleeding wound in my foot. Now I tend to carry scissors by the blades rather than by the handles. Story 42. I quickly turned around, ran into a pole, and got a large goose egg on my forehead. Story 43. Well, I sneezed last week, threw my shoulder out and could not move my neck for 2 weeks. Story 44. I dropped a knife from the counter and instinctively tried to catch it with my foot. Story 45. I entered a pogo stick bouncing contest and won, but the contest gave me a hernia. Story 46. As a kid, I had a hunting knife. In West Virginia, they were issued at birth, and I threw it into things: trees, the shed, and the ground. Then I stabbed my finger with it. I still have the scar. Story 47. When I was about 12, I burst into my friend's room to scare him. His door had no doorknob, so when I pushed it open, I stuck my hand into the hole where the doorknob should have been. My index finger went into the door jamb, and the nail was ripped straight off. Story 48. When I was in high school, I bought 15 sheep. They kicked me. Story 49. I cut my finger with a paint scraper while cleaning a mirror. I also burned my hand badly with boiling water at school. Laughing out loud. Story 50. I attempted to recreate the Roblox waving animation and cut my finger on my ceiling fan. Story 51. I was sitting on the ground when I stood up and tore the medial collateral ligament in my right knee. Story 52. The worst way I hurt myself was when I was 4. I was playing soccer in the house and not watching where I was going. I was running at full speed and ran face first into the corner of a wall. splitting my face from under my nose to my chin. I remember being seated on the counter, while my mom, a nurse of only a few years, tried to hold the wound closed. My dad started crying, which made me cry. I was rushed to the hospital, received many stitches, and still have a scar. My dad later said that when I started crying, my face flapped because it had split open. Story 53. I stepped off a curb and fell. I broke one ankle and badly sprained the other. It was the first day of vacation. We were still unloading the car. Story 54. I sprained my ankle falling off a stage. I was thrown from a horse while riding with a broken leg. I pierced my own nose with a safety pin and it became infected. Which was the dumbest? You can't even choose. I'm pretty dumb sometimes. Story 55. I was 3 or 4 years old and had new foam platform sandals. I saw an upright nail outside and thought I bet my shoes were thicker than that nail, so I stomped on it. They were not thicker at all. In hindsight, that was a risky bet. Story 56. I sliced my thumb open with a kitchen knife. I was curious to see what was inside a widget, which is a plastic sphere that was inside some beer cans to help with the head when poured into a glass. I was drunk and just managed to avoid getting stitches. My thumbprint looked dead for a while. The scar is still there. Story 57. I sliced my thumb open with a kitchen knife. I was curious to see what was inside a widget. These were plastic spheres that used to be inside some beer cans to help create the foam when you poured the beer into a glass. I was drunk and just managed to avoid getting stitches. My thumbprint looked dead for a while. The scar is still there. Story 58. I was cooking barefoot and dropped a chef's knife. It went through my foot. Dinner had to be postponed. Story 59. I sliced my thumb open with a kitchen knife. I was curious to see what was inside a widget. Widgets are plastic spheres that used to be inside some beer cans to help with the head when poured into a glass. I was drunk and just managed to avoid getting stitches. My thumbprint looked dead for a while. The scar is still there. Story 60. It was not that I did something foolish, but I cut my cornea while shuffling papers. One slipped and hit my eye. Luckily, there was no permanent damage, but I did not even know that could happen. I do not recommend it. Story 61. I once put a piping hot cup of tea on a book on our couch before going to the kitchen. I came back and sat down. The tea spilled and burned the absolute fuck out of my butt cheek. My husband had to put lotion on my butt for 2 weeks. Story 62. A tree was leaning over the trail about 7 feet above the ground. I went up, jumped to slap it, and the whole thing came down, crushing me. I was bruised and a couple of ribs were badly injured. I had a very hard time breathing. A few days later, luckily, I had not broken anything, but I probably should have that day. There is a reason they call them widowmakers. Story 63. I rollerblade with my dog, ended up breaking my femur, and had to have a titanium rod inserted. Story 64. I stood up from my office chair and caught my pinky finger under the arm. My finger snapped outward and suffered a spiral fracture. I had pins surgically placed for 8 weeks to allow it to heal. Story 65. When I was a small child, I hit my chin while trying to bowl. I needed 8 stitches. Story 66. When I was 5, I hit myself in the forehead with the claw of a hammer. Story 67. I was diagnosed with walking pneumonia and coughed so hard I broke my first rib. The fracture appeared on a computed tomography scan as an osteolytic lesion, a sign of malignant bone destruction, so I immediately had to undergo a bone scan, a bone biopsy, and a positron emission tomography scan to rule out secondary bone cancer. I do not have bone cancer. Honorable mention. The time I stepped on the flat of a nail, retracted violently in pain, and accidentally somersaulted down a hill. Story 68. I got drunk and went to bed. I did not realize I had stubbed my middle toe so hard that I fractured it. I woke up in pain. Story 69. As a 5-year-old, I wondered what would happen if I closed a binder on the webbing between my pinky and ring finger. I put it in just barely and snapped it shut. I screamed for a while until my mom finally figured out what was going on. Ow, that really hurt. Story 70. I poked an eraser with a mechanical pencil during an exam because I was bored. I pushed it very hard and missed. The pencil lead punctured my skin and lodged underneath. I panicked and fainted, but everyone thought I was sleeping, and I remained like that for 15 minutes. I went home terrified that the lead would travel to my heart and pierce it, and that I would die. Later, I removed it myself by carefully pressing and forcing it out. Story 71. When I was about 14 or 15, I was at a trampoline park. While jumping, my spine stretched and decompressed. I landed too hard and felt my back slam down and compress instantly. Story 72. I woke up with a sprained neck. I was in a neck brace for a week. Story 73. Walking down the ramp to my shed 2 weeks ago, my left foot slipped and I caught myself on my right foot. I heard and felt a loud pop and then fell down in absolute agony. I tore the posterior cruciate ligament and the quadriceps tendon in my right knee. I had surgery today. The surgeon said the quadriceps tendon was barely hanging on by a thread and was almost completely torn in half. All because I slipped while trying to walk slowly and carefully because the ramp was wet from rain. So frustrating. Story 74. While working in construction, I was using an extension ladder with 4 pins to collapse it. It was around 8 a.m. It was raining, windy, and I was tired and not fully alert. I had placed my wrist inside the ladder rungs and pulled what I thought was the 3rd pin, but it was the 4th. The top half of the ladder, about 10 to 15 feet, came crashing down onto my wrist. There was a noticeable dent in my wrist. When I stood in the shower, water would fill it and not drain, like a bird bath. My wrist was badly sprained. I had to wear a splint for a few weeks. Thankfully, there was plenty of work that did not require using tools such as a hammer. Story 75. I tried kicking a soccer ball up a set of stairs. It bounced back and hit me in the face. Story 76. When I was 8 years old, I tried woodworking with an extremely sharp chisel and a hard block of wood. The chisel cut so deep I felt it hit the bone, but it did not bleed at first. When it began to bleed, it bled heavily. Story 77. I had a balloon in my lap that I was trying to burst with my fist. I ended up punching myself in the nuts when it burst. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.